The evening had that heavy sweetness of late summer, air thick with the smell of roses, roasted meat, and expensive champagne. The backyard I built with my own hands was glowing under strings of lights, full of people in bright clothes and polished smiles. My daughter's wedding. My Lily. I watched her from a distance as she twirled on the dance floor, the hem of her white dress brushing against the grass. Her laughter filled the air, light and trembling, though I could tell it wasn't the same laugh she used to have when she was little, the one that used to echo across this same yard when I pushed her on the old swing I'd made from oak. Now, she laughed because she had to, because that's what brides do. I stood near the fence, holding a cup of weak coffee I'd brewed myself in the kitchen that morning. No one offered me champagne. I didn't ask for any. They called me the father of the bride, but none of them really looked at me that way. They just saw an old man in a worn vest who didn't quite fit into their world of fancy suits and perfect teeth. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan appeared. My new son-in-law. He had that air of entitlement you can smell even before a man opens his mouth. His smile was too sharp, his handshake always a little too firm, like he was testing how much you tolerate. Tonight, the alcohol had loosened his manners. His tie hung crooked, his voice slurred, but the arrogance stayed crystal clear. "Harold," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder, his fingers heavy and possessive. "We need to talk." I nodded slowly. "What's wrong?" He leaned closer, close enough for me to smell the whiskey on his breath. "It's about your room." "My room?" I repeated, not quite following. "Yeah, we've got guests. Some family from out of state. They need a place to stay tonight." He smiled as if he were offering me a favor. "You don't mind sleeping outside for one night, do you? There's that sofa under the porch. Looks comfortable enough." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. The laughter from inside blurred into a faint ringing in my ears. "You're joking," I said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "You've had that room for decades, Harold. It's time you learn to share. You'll survive one night under the stars." I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, deep sting that words can't describe. "That room," I said, my voice trembling not from fear but anger, "is in the house I built. With my own hands." He smirked. "Exactly. Which means you'll understand the value of letting others enjoy it now." My mouth went dry. I looked past him toward Lily. She was standing near the dessert table, pretending not to hear us. Her eyes met mine for a split second, and then, like a child caught in a lie, she turned away. My heart sank lower than it ever had. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just Ethan's cruelty that stung, it was her silence. He patted my shoulder again, far too hard. "Glad we understand each other, old man." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd of laughing guests. I stood there for a long while, listening to the muffled music, the clinking glasses, the echo of Lily's fake laughter. My home, my sanctuary, felt like a stranger's house filled with strangers' noise. By midnight, the guests had started to fade, their cars rolling down the road one by one. I lingered near the porch, unsure where to go. Ethan came out again, carrying 2 empty bottles. He looked at me as if I were furniture left in the wrong place. "Blankets on the swing," he said. "Good night." Then the door shut behind him. The night air bit at my skin. I walked across the lawn to the old swing under the oak tree. It creaked when I sat down. The same swing Lily used to beg me to push higher. Back then, her tiny hands would grab the ropes and her laughter would burst through the air like sunlight. I used to think I'd never forget that sound. Now it haunted me. Through the window, I saw them, Ethan, his parents, and Lily, sitting by the fireplace, eating cake and smiling. My chest tightened. For a second, I wanted to storm in and remind them whose house this was. To shout, to throw them all out. But instead, I stayed quiet. Because yelling would have made me small. And I'd learned long ago, when the world disrespects you, the loudest revenge is silence. I sat there until dawn, my back stiff, my fingers tracing the carved initials on the wooden seat. H+L. I'd carved them there when Lily was 5. She used to call it our secret. I smiled bitterly. Maybe it still was, though not the way she thought. When the sun began to rise, the house stood calm and innocent, as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had changed. Not outside, inside me. In the quiet of that morning, I walked into the shed. The smell of sawdust and oil still lingered from the days when I was strong enough to work 12 hours straight. On the shelf, behind a row of old tools, was a small wooden box. Inside, a spare key, documents, old receipts, and one secret that would turn the tables in ways Ethan could never imagine. They thought they had pushed me aside, that I'd fade away quietly like an old photograph left in the rain. But I'd built this house once, and I could rebuild my life again without them. They just didn't know what kind of man they'd awakened. The morning after the wedding felt colder than usual, though the summer sun was already climbing high. The laughter and music were gone, replaced by the soft hum of silence. I sat on the porch, my cup of coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the same windows where I'd seen them celebrating without me just hours before. Inside, the house looked different now. My photos, the ones of Lily as a little girl, covered in mud after helping me plant tomatoes, had been taken down. In their place were framed portraits of Ethan's family. Polished faces, perfect smiles, as if they'd been waiting for this day, to move in and erase my life, piece by piece. Ethan came out of the bedroom around 9, his shirt half-buttoned, his expression casual, almost smug. "Morning, Harold," he said, stretching. "Sleep well?" I didn't answer. He chuckled to himself, then stepped closer. "Don't take it personally. You're part of the old chapter. Time to make space for the new one." I met his gaze and said quietly, "This house has no chapters, Ethan. It has a foundation, built with blood, not ink." He laughed. "Whatever you say, old man. Just don't get in the way. We're doing some renovations soon." Renovations. That word stuck in my mind like a splinter. When he left for work, or wherever he pretended to go, I went inside. The smell of perfume lingered, mixed with the faint scent of sawdust and pine from the walls I'd carved myself decades ago. Every corner of the place had a story. Every nail, every beam. In the kitchen, Lily stood by the sink, staring at her wedding ring. She didn't notice me at first. When she finally did, she smiled faintly. "Dad, about last night." "Don't," I interrupted. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "You don't have to explain anything." Tears welled in her eyes. "He didn't mean it that way. He was drunk. You know how Ethan gets." "Drunk words," I said quietly, "are sober thoughts." She froze. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to hide behind my workshop door after breaking something. I almost reached out to touch her hand, to tell her it was okay. But it wasn't. She sighed and turned away. "Please, Dad, just don't make this harder. Ethan wants us all to get along." Get along. The words hit me like cold water. How do you get along with someone who throws you out of your own home? When she left the kitchen, I opened the drawer where I used to keep the household papers. It was empty. Completely. Not even a bill or receipt left. That's when I went to the shed. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the small wooden box from last night. Inside, folded neatly under an old photograph of Lily and me, were the property deeds. Signed, sealed, and still in my name. I'd never transferred the ownership. I was planning to, as a wedding gift, but something in my gut had stopped me last week. Now I understood why. That piece of paper was more than a document. It was control. That night, I sat in my armchair and pretended to fall asleep while Ethan and Lily chatted in the next room. His voice carried, smooth, confident, commanding. "We'll fix the backyard, get rid of that ugly shed. Then maybe we can convince the old man to move out permanently. He's slowing everything down." My hands tightened around the armrest. Every word scraped against my nerves, but I stayed still, listening. Lily's voice trembled. "He's my father, Ethan. Don't talk about him like that." Ethan laughed softly. "Sweetheart, I'm just thinking about us. About our future. You don't want to live in a museum, do you?" Silence. Then the faint sound of her agreeing. Reluctantly, quietly. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced through every memory, every sacrifice I'd made to build this home. For her. For us. And now, I was watching her slip away into someone else's hands. But anger wasn't the right weapon. Not yet. At dawn, I went back to the shed. The smell of old wood and varnish felt comforting, honest. I dusted off the workbench, laid out a few tools, and started carving. Not furniture this time, something smaller. A wooden box. Simple, elegant, with a lock slot carved perfectly in the center. It wasn't what it seemed, but Ethan didn't need to know that. By noon, Lily came outside. "What are you working on, Dad?" she asked softly. "Just something to keep the house safe," I said, my voice even. She tilted her head. "Safe? From what?" I smiled. "From time." She didn't understand, but that was fine. She wasn't supposed to. That evening, Ethan returned with two men in suits. They laughed loudly as they walked around the property, pointing at things: the shed, the fence, the garden. I watched from the porch, unseen, like a ghost in my own yard. When they left, I caught the end of their conversation. "We'll finalize the deal after he moves out. No point rushing, he'll give in soon." Deal. So it wasn't just pride. It was money. My house. My land. And they thought I wouldn't notice. That night, I opened the small wooden box I'd carved earlier. Inside, I placed something I hadn't touched in years, a tiny flash drive. On it were all the documents, blueprints, and legal records of the property's construction. Proof that every inch of it was mine. I smiled for the first time that day. They wanted me gone. They wanted my silence. They'd have both, but on my terms. By the end of that week, the house no longer smelled like home. The scent of fresh paint and Ethan's cologne had replaced the warmth of coffee and sawdust. Even the light felt different, harsher, colder, like it was reflecting off the surface of something fake. I kept quiet. That was my weapon now, silence. Every morning, Ethan strutted through the kitchen in his crisp shirts and shiny shoes, acting like the king of a castle he didn't build. He'd toss his keys on the counter and kiss Lily on the forehead, calling her princess. He never looked at me when I sat by the window, sipping my coffee. To him, I was furniture, old, immovable, and fading. But I saw everything. I saw the way he had phone calls when Lily entered the room. I saw how he flinched when bills arrived. And I saw the bank letters he tried to throw away before anyone could read them. He was in trouble, deep trouble. I didn't know the details yet, but I could smell desperation on him like I used to smell smoke before a storm. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to find him on the phone. His voice was low, angry. "I told you, I'll get the money. The house is almost mine." He turned and froze when he saw me standing there. For a brief second, his mask cracked. Then he smirked. "Eavesdropping now, Harold?" "I built these walls," I said softly. "They carry sound." He laughed, pretending not to care, and brushed past me. But his hands were shaking. I noticed. That night, while everyone slept, I went to his office, a new space he'd set up in my old living room. The door wasn't locked. Inside, papers were scattered across the desk, mortgage documents, property transfer drafts, and something that made my stomach twist, a loan application in Lily's name. Signed. Her handwriting was shaky, uncertain, so he was using her. I closed the drawer quietly and left everything as I found it. No confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I returned to my shed and began sketching something on a pad of paper. A plan, not of revenge, but of recovery. A way to reclaim what was mine without a single raised voice. The next day, I told Lily I wanted to renovate the garden. "A gift for you both," I said, forcing a smile. Her eyes brightened. "Really? Ethan's been talking about that." "I know," I replied. "That's why I'll handle it personally. You two can focus on whatever you need." It wasn't hard to convince them. Ethan loved anything that sounded like free labor. Within days, I started clearing the shed, moving old planks and tools into neat piles. But beneath that simple task, I was laying the groundwork for something else, something invisible to them. Inside the shed's back wall, behind a loose wooden panel, there was an old breaker box, one I'd installed decades ago when I wired the house myself. I ran my fingers over the switches, smiling faintly. Few people knew it controlled more than just the shed's lights. It also connected to the secondary circuit that powered the external gate and security system, both tied to the property's ownership authorization from the city's system. In short, Ethan might have owned the paperwork he forged, but the house itself, the system, the land registration, was still under my name. And I could prove it. But I needed time. And patience. That evening, as I worked in the yard, Ethan came out holding 2 glasses of whiskey. "Peace offering," he said with that snake oil grin. I took the glass, but didn't drink. "You planning another wedding?" I asked. He laughed, loud and fake. "You've got jokes now. Good. Maybe we're finally getting along." "I'm always getting along," I said, just at my own pace. He clinked his glass against mine and walked off, muttering something about contractors coming next week. I watched him disappear inside, his reflection vanishing in the kitchen window. The next morning, a truck arrived, a big one. Men in dusty boots began unloading tools and materials. Ethan walked around, giving orders as if he owned the place. He told them to tear down the shed first. "The shed's old, Harold," he said when I protested. We'll replace it with something modern, maybe even a guest house. That shed's part of this home's foundation, I said. He smirked. Exactly. Time to rebuild. I didn't argue. I simply walked away, toward the oak tree where Lily once swung as a child. From there, I watched them start. But what Ethan didn't know was that I had already removed what mattered from that shed 2 nights before. The documents, the flash drive, the property key, everything that could expose him. By sunset, the shed was gone, and Ethan was satisfied, bragging to his friends on the phone about progress. He didn't even notice me quietly standing near the fence, notebook in hand, watching every nail and board fall. When the workers left, I went inside. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. Ethan said the renovation will cost more than expected, she whispered. He asked if I could sell my car. I felt my jaw tighten. Lily, I said softly, do you trust him? She looked up, startled. Of course. Why wouldn't I? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, while they slept, I took my old phone and made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My old friend, Samuel. He'd worked in real estate law before retiring. The kind of man who remembered every clause, every loophole. Harold Whitmore, he said with a chuckle when he picked up. Haven't heard that name in a while. I need your help, Sam, I said quietly. It's about my house. He paused. Your house? What's wrong? I told him everything. Not in anger, not in rage, just the facts. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then Samuel sighed. Send me copies of every document you've got. Don't let him see you looking into this. Men like that, they panic when they realize the ground isn't theirs. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went to my workshop drawer, opened the wooden box, and took out the flash drive. I plugged it into my old laptop and copied the contents into a folder labeled Lily's Future. Because my fight wasn't about pride anymore. It was about saving my daughter before she drowned in the life he built on lies. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, warm and bright, but it didn't reach me. I sat at the table, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of me, listening to Ethan's cheerful humming from the next room. He was making pancakes, acting like nothing had happened. Like the house, the lies, the humiliation, none of it mattered. He had no idea how much I already knew. I watched him move around the kitchen as if it belonged to him. He even used my mug, the one with the faded carving of Lily's name on it. That simple act said everything. Morning, Harold, he said, flipping a pancake onto a plate. Hope you're hungry. I made enough for everyone. I forced a small smile. You're full of surprises, Ethan. He grinned, sliding a plate toward me. Trying to keep the peace. We're family now, right? Family. The word stung. Lily walked in a moment later, still in her robe, her hair tied up. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, shoulders tense. Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist and kissed her cheek. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded faintly, though her eyes didn't meet mine. I knew then she was afraid, not of me, but of him. Of what would happen if she said the wrong thing. Ethan left after breakfast, his cologne hanging heavy in the air. The sound of his car fading down the road was the first peace I'd felt all morning. I turned to Lily. Does he treat you well when I'm not here? I asked. Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint tremble of her hands. Then she whispered, he's under a lot of stress, Dad. With the loans and the business. What business? She froze. He said you knew. He's opening a construction company, using the house as collateral for the startup. My stomach turned. So that was it. He wasn't just greedy, he was reckless. Gambling my home, her safety, everything, for some fantasy of success. Lily, I said slowly, that man is digging a grave with your name on it. Tears filled her eyes. You don't understand him. He's just trying to build something. Like you did. I wanted to argue, but I stopped myself. She wouldn't hear me, not yet. She was trapped in that familiar web of hope and fear, where love blinds you to danger until it's too late. That night, I called Samuel again. He'd gone through the files I sent him and sounded more serious than before. You're right, Harold. He's planning to transfer ownership through your daughter's name, and then use her signature to secure the loan. The bank won't question it if it looks like a family arrangement. My grip tightened on the phone. So she'd be liable when he fails? Yes, and from what I've seen, he already has 2 other failed ventures behind him. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Samuel added, "Do you want to press charges now, or wait?" "Neither," I said. "Not yet." "Then what are you planning?" I looked toward the window, where the reflection of the house shimmered under the moonlight. Beautiful, fragile, temporary. To let him build his own trap. Over the next few days, I played my part. The quiet, old fool who couldn't keep up with the times. I let Ethan brag about his new business to his friends, watched him sign fake contracts, and smiled when he called me grandpa in front of them. He thought he was winning. But what he didn't realize was that I had already given Samuel power of attorney for the property, signed and notarized, quietly, one morning when Ethan was out meeting investors. The land, the documents, the deed, all safe. Legally protected. The rest was just a matter of waiting. Lily tried to keep up appearances. She cleaned, cooked, smiled at dinner, but the light in her eyes kept dimming. Every time Ethan scolded her for spending too much, I saw her shrink a little more. One evening, I found her standing by the back door, staring at the empty patch of dirt where the shed used to be. "I miss that place," she said softly. "It smelled like home." I nodded. "That's because it was built with care, not money." She smiled sadly. "You always say things like that." "Because they're true," I said. "And because someday, you'll need to remember them." That night, I began writing a letter, long, detailed, and honest. It wasn't for Ethan. It was for her. I wrote about her mother, about the nights I stayed up building this house, about what love really meant. Not control, not possession, but sacrifice. When I finished, I placed the letter in the wooden box beside the flash drive. If anything happened to me, Samuel would deliver both to her. But I wasn't planning on dying. Not yet. 2 weeks later, the first cracks began to show. Ethan's business partners stopped calling. The contractors he'd hired demanded payment. He started pacing around the house, shouting at Lily over nothing. The mask was slipping. One afternoon, I caught him on the phone again, this time yelling. "You can't pull out now." I said I'll get the money. He slammed the phone down so hard the glass cracked. When he turned around, he saw me standing in the doorway. For the first time, his confidence faltered. "What are you looking at, old man?" he snapped. I smiled faintly, just wondering what it feels like to watch your own lies collapse. He stepped closer, his face twisting. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think this is still your house?" I met his eyes. "I don't think, Ethan. I know." He hesitated, a flicker of doubt, quickly masked by arrogance. "You'll see how wrong you are soon." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. That night, I heard him digging through drawers and tearing open boxes, probably searching for documents. He didn't know they were already gone. By the next morning, Lily looked pale and scared. "Dad, Ethan said something crazy last night," she whispered. "He thinks someone's sabotaging him." I smiled. "Then maybe he's finally seeing clearly." She frowned, confused. "You're not doing anything, are you?" I looked her in the eyes, calm, steady. "Sometimes, Lily, justice doesn't come from courts. It comes from quiet hands." She didn't ask again. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. I looked at the horizon, at the storm rolling in. It was time. Time to finish what he started. 3 days after the storm began to brew, it finally broke. Not the one in the sky. That came later, but the one I had been waiting for. It started with a phone call. Ethan was still half asleep when it rang. He groaned, picked it up, and within seconds his voice changed, sharp, panicked. "What do you mean the deal's off?" "You can't." His face drained of color. "No, listen, I'll get the papers. The house is mine, I swear." I sat by the window, pretending to read the newspaper, but my ears caught every word. He hung up and slammed the phone against the table so hard that Lily jumped. "Those idiots backed out," he hissed. "They're saying the property isn't under my name. Some mix-up in the registration." I sipped my coffee. "A mix-up, you say?" He glared at me, eyes narrowing. "You know something about this, don't you?" I met his gaze calmly. "Only that paperwork tends to tell the truth, even when people don't." For a moment, he looked like he might hit me. His hand clenched, then released. Instead, he turned toward Lily. "Call the bank. We'll fix this today." She nodded nervously and reached for the phone. I could see the fear in her eyes, not of me, but of him. Every word he spoke seemed to carve another line into her face. By afternoon, the storm clouds gathered above the house. Thunder rolled across the valley as if nature itself was watching what came next. Ethan came back from the bank looking like a ghost. He poured himself a drink, spilling some on the counter. They said the property's frozen, he muttered. Pending investigation. Something about false signatures and prior ownership claims. I folded my paper and looked up. Well, I said softly, it's good they're being thorough. He spun on me. You did this. I didn't flinch. No, Ethan. You did this the day you tried to throw me into the yard. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Rage was written all over him, yet underneath it, fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. That night, I heard him pacing in his office, muttering to himself, calling people who stopped answering. Around midnight, Lily came to my door, tears streaming down her face. Dad, he's losing it, she whispered. He said someone's framing him, that he's going to the police. I stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, sweetheart. The truth can't hurt the innocent. But he said. I shook my head gently. Go to bed, Lily. Tomorrow will be different. When she left, I sat down at my desk and opened my old laptop. The folder Lily's future blinked at me. Inside was everything. Every bank receipt Ethan had forged, every fake loan he'd tied to the house, and the audio file Samuel had helped me record from the legal meeting last week. It was clear, undeniable proof of Ethan's fraud. I sent it to Samuel with one line. You know what to do. By morning, the storm outside matched the one inside the house. Rain hammered against the windows as two black cars pulled into the driveway. Two men in suits stepped out, followed by a third, an officer in a gray coat. Ethan stumbled to the door before I could even stand. What is this? He shouted. You can't just. The officer's tone was calm. Mr. Brooks, you're under investigation for financial fraud, forgery, and attempted identity theft. Please come with us. Lily gasped. Identity theft? What are you talking about? Ethan turned to her, eyes wide, desperate. They're lying, Lily. Your father, he's the one who. Enough, I said, stepping forward. She deserves to hear the truth. The officer handed Lily a folder. Inside were copies of the fake transfer papers, the loan documents, and Ethan's emails. Her hand shook as she flipped through them. Ethan, she whispered, her voice breaking. You used my name? I did it for us, he cried. For our future. I just needed collateral. No, she said, stepping back. You needed control. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that settles into your bones. The officers read him his rights as he shouted, begged, then cursed. When they let him out into the rain, I watched from the porch, my hands clasped behind my back. He turned once, eyes full of hatred. You think you won, old man, he spat. You ruined her life. I stared at him steadily. No, Ethan. I saved it. The car door slammed. The sound echoed through the rain like a closing chapter. Lily stood in the doorway, tears streaking her face. Dad, what happens now? I sighed, walking toward her. Now, I said softly, we start over. She fell into my arms and sobbed, just like she did when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I held her until the shaking stopped. Over the next few days, the house felt different again, quieter, cleaner, lighter. She took down the photos of Ethan's family and put mine back. We repaired what we could, threw away what hurt too much to keep. One evening, as we sat by the fire, she looked at me and said, You always knew, didn't you? I smiled faintly. A father always knows. He just waits for his child to see it too. Outside, the rain stopped. The air smelled fresh, almost new. For the first time in months, I felt peace. But inside me, a small ache remained. Because revenge, even quiet, patient revenge, never comes without a price. That night, I walked out to the oak tree, the one where the old swing used to hang. I ran my hand along its trunk, feeling the rough bark beneath my fingertips. This is where it began, I whispered, and this is where it ends. But even as I said it, I knew the story wasn't over. Because life never stops testing those who refuse to break. And though Ethan was gone, some wounds, especially the ones carved by family, take longer to heal than any man expects. For a while, it felt like peace had returned. The days grew quieter, the house warmer. Lily smiled again, not the nervous, forced kind of smile she wore beside Ethan, but the one I remembered from when she was young. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. But peace, I've learned, is never permanent. It's only the calm that waits before another wave. It began with a letter. It arrived 2 weeks after Ethan's arrest, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Lily was the one who found it in the mailbox. "It's for you," she said, handing it over. Her voice was casual, but there was something uneasy in her eyes, as if she already sensed what it might contain. Inside, there was no letter, only a flash drive. No note, no sender, just a small black stick with a single scratch across the surface. I turned it in my hand, feeling that old tension creep back. After a moment, I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, and a video opened automatically. The image was grainy, but I recognized the voice instantly, Ethan's. He was sitting in some dimly lit room, his face drawn and pale. Behind him, a metal door. A holding cell. He looked straight at the camera. "Harold," he said, his tone calm but cold. "I know what you did, and I know you think you've won. But you didn't destroy me. You just woke something worse." He leaned forward, the light catching the bitterness in his eyes. "You might have taken my name, my house, my money, but I still have one thing you can't touch, my connections." The video glitched. Static filled the screen for a few seconds. Then it returned. "You thought you erased me? No. I left a trail. And when the time comes, it'll lead right back to your precious daughter." The feed cut to black. I sat there for a long while, staring at the empty screen. My hands didn't shake, not this time. My heart didn't race. It just hardened. I'd seen men like Ethan before, the kind who believe that power makes them immortal. But I also knew something else. The louder they roar, the more afraid they are of fading into silence. Still, his words echoed through me. "It'll lead right back to your daughter." I couldn't ignore that. That evening, I called Samuel again. He answered on the first ring. "Harold, I was just about to contact you. There's been movement on the case." "What kind of movement?" "They've traced a series of transactions from Ethan's old accounts. It seems he transferred funds into a shell company weeks before his arrest. The name on the records is Lily Brooks." My blood ran cold. She didn't know about this. "I know. It was done before the wedding. He used her name, her ID, everything. But Harold, that money didn't just vanish. It's sitting in an account tied to your property's address." A pause. The sound of thunder outside filled the silence between us. "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. "It means if someone wants to make her look guilty," Samuel said, "they already have all they need." When I hung up, the rain had started again. I stood by the window, watching the drops streak down the glass. Lily was in the living room, folding laundry, humming softly to herself. Innocent, unaware. I couldn't let her see the fear in my eyes. That night, after she went to bed, I went to my workshop again. The old wooden box sat on the bench, the one that had already protected us once. I unlocked it, took out a new flash drive, and began copying every file I had. Not just on Ethan, but on the bank, the transfers, the property. If he wanted to play ghost, I'd make sure his shadow couldn't touch us again. But something didn't sit right. The next morning, the front gate was open. Wide. I never left it that way. Lily was making breakfast when I asked her if she'd been outside. She shook her head. "No, why?" "Because someone has," I said quietly. I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled of wet earth and gasoline. Footprints, faint but fresh, led from the gate to the garage. The door was ajar. Inside, one of the cabinets had been forced open. My tools were scattered across the floor. Nothing seemed missing, until I noticed the empty space on the shelf. The first wooden box. The original one. Gone. My chest tightened. That box had contained the letter to Lily, my notes, copies of every document, even the old property key. Someone had been here. That night, Lily noticed my silence at dinner. "Dad," she said softly, "you're scaring me. What's going on?" I forced a tired smile. "Just thinking too much." She frowned. "Is this about Ethan again?" "He's gone, Dad." I looked into her eyes. People like him don't just go. They linger. They rot the air even when they're buried. Later, when she went to bed, I sat alone by the window, staring out into the darkness. The rain had stopped, but the world still glistened, wet, reflective, deceptive. In the glass, I saw my own reflection beside another shape, faint, blurred, standing near the oak tree. I turned sharply. Nothing. Only the swing moving slowly in the breeze. Still, I knew what I saw. Ethan might have been in prison, but someone else was following his trail. Someone who still worked for him. The quiet peace I'd fought for was crumbling again, one shadow at a time. But I wasn't the same man he'd humiliated at the wedding. If they wanted to haunt me, they'd find out soon enough that ghosts don't frighten builders. I build. I repair. And when I must, I bury. The following nights were restless. Sleep slipped away like mist, replaced by the creak of the house settling and the whisper of rain against the windows. Each sound made me listen harder. Not out of fear. I stopped fearing long ago, but because I could feel that something was off. On the third night, I heard it clearly, a soft crunch of gravel by the gate. I rose quietly, careful not to wake Lily, and looked through the curtains. A figure stood near the oak tree, motionless, watching the house. He was tall, wearing a dark raincoat and a hood that shadowed his face. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them. I waited for him to move, but he didn't. He simply stood there until a car passed by, its headlights cutting through the mist. When the light hit him, he turned and vanished down the road. By morning, I found footprints again, deeper this time. He hadn't come closer, but he'd stayed longer. That afternoon, I called Samuel. "Harold," he said, "I've been going through those bank transfers again. There's a name that keeps appearing, Cole Weston. Ring a bell?" I frowned. No. Should it? He was Ethan's partner in one of his failed ventures. Real estate, I think. But here's the thing. He was never officially charged. Disappeared 2 months ago, right before Ethan's arrest. And you think he's involved? I think he's cleaning up Ethan's mess, or protecting his share. When I hung up, I looked out at the yard again. The swing under the oak swayed slightly in the breeze. Cole Weston. The name fit the man I'd seen. Tall, deliberate, patient. That evening, I told Lily to stay with a friend for a few days. She resisted at first, but when she saw how serious I was, she agreed. I told her it was just for some repairs around the house. She didn't need to know the truth. Not yet. Once she left, I started setting traps. Not the kind you find in hunter's manuals, simpler things. A few motion lights I still had from the old shed, a wire connected to a bell in the hallway, and an old trail camera hidden near the oak. I'd used it years ago to watch deer. Tonight, it would watch something else. At midnight, I turned off every light and sat in the kitchen, waiting. It didn't take long. The bell gave a soft chime, once, twice. I looked toward the window. The sensor light flickered on outside. The figure was back. This time, he moved with purpose. He crossed the yard and crouched near the garage door. A faint metallic sound echoed, a lockpick. I slipped on my coat, picked up the old wrench from the counter, and opened the door just enough to step outside. The cold air hit me like a slap. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Under the hood, I saw the faint outline of a scar across his cheek. "You shouldn't be out here, old man," he said. His voice was rough, quiet, the kind used by people who've spent too much time whispering in shadows. "Neither should you," I said. He straightened, hands slightly raised. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need what's mine." "And what's that?" "The box," he said simply. "Ethan told me where it was." My heart sank. So it was true. Ethan had sent him before the arrest, and now he was here to finish the job. "I don't have it," I lied. He tilted his head. "Then you won't mind me checking." He stepped forward. I didn't move. "You touch that door," I said quietly, "and you'll regret it." He laughed softly. "You're brave. I'll give you that." Then he lunged. I wasn't fast, but I was ready. The wrench caught his arm mid-swing, and he stumbled back with a grunt. His shoulder hit the doorframe, knocking it open. The light from inside spilled across his face, sharp jaw, scar, cold eyes. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I swung again, not to hurt, just to warn. The wrench cracked against the ground near his foot, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, both breathing hard. Finally, he hissed through his teeth. "You think this ends here? Ethan's not done with you." "He's behind bars," I said. "He's done with everything." He smirked. "You really believe that?" The man had backups for everything. Files, people, plans. "You took one piece, Harold, not the whole game." Then he backed away, slowly disappearing into the dark the same way he came. When he was gone, I locked every door, every window. But no lock can keep out what's already inside your head. The next morning, I checked the trail camera. The footage showed him clearly. Cole Weston, staring straight at the lens before walking away. He'd wanted to be seen. Samuel confirmed it a few hours later. "That's him," he said grimly. "He's dangerous, Harold. Don't try to confront him again." I already did. Then you're lucky you're still breathing. I don't believe in luck, I said. Just timing. That evening, I packed a small bag, documents, the second flash drive, and a photograph of Lily when she was 5. Then I went to the attic, to the hidden panel behind the insulation, and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, an old tape recorder. If Cole wanted the truth, I'd give it to him my way. I pressed record and began speaking, my voice steady. My name is Harold Whitmore. If you're hearing this, it means the man who stood by my oak tree has come back. I built this house to protect my daughter, and I'll protect her again, even if I have to tear it down to do it. I stopped the tape, labeled it with the date, and placed it beside the flash drive. Then I locked the attic. When I went back downstairs, I stood by the window again. The night was still, too still. No footsteps, no shadows. But I knew he'd return, because men like Cole and Ethan never stop until they take everything. The only mistake they make is underestimating the man who already lost it all once. For 3 nights, the man didn't return. But silence can be more dangerous than noise. It lets your imagination whisper what's waiting just beyond the window. I hardly slept. Each evening I checked the locks, the lights, the camera. The same loop over and over, like a soldier who knows the attack won't come until the one night he relaxes. Then, on the 4th night, the storm returned. Heavy rain fell sideways against the windows, and thunder rolled like a warning. The air smelled of ozone and wet soil, the kind of air that always comes before something bad. Lily was still away at her friend's house. Thank God. I sat in the kitchen, reading by the faint light of the old lamp. The rain masked all other sounds, which is why I didn't hear the first noise, a faint metallic clink at the back door. The second one was louder. I rose quietly, my knees cracking, and reached for the wrench I kept on the counter. The house was dark except for flashes of lightning through the curtains. Then I saw him, Cole Weston, standing at the threshold, soaked to the bone, his hood pulled back, his face lit white by lightning. His eyes looked almost feverish. Evening, Harold, he said softly. His voice was calmer this time, too calm. You've got something that doesn't belong to you. You mean the truth? I asked. He smiled, a small, cruel twist of the lips. Call it what you want. Ethan wants it back. He's in prison. For now. Cole stepped further into the kitchen, dripping water onto the floor. But he won't stay there long. He has people, money, leverage. You think the law scares a man who's already built his life on breaking it? I kept my eyes on him, my voice steady. Then why send you instead of waiting? Because he wants you scared, Cole said simply. He wants you to watch what happens to everything you love before he even touches it. He glanced toward the living room. My stomach clenched, the photo wall. The one Lily had just restored with our family pictures. I stepped between him and it. You're not touching anything in this house. He took a slow step forward, pulling something from his pocket. A lighter. Cheap. Metal scratched. He flicked it once. The tiny flame glowed between us. Funny thing about old houses, he murmured. They burn fast. I didn't hesitate. The wrench swung before he even finished speaking. It hit his wrist, and the lighter flew across the floor, clattering under the table. He cursed, staggering back. Big mistake, old man. He lunged. We crashed into the counter, dishes shattering around us. His shoulder slammed into my ribs, knocking the wind out of me. Pain shot up my side, but I didn't let go of the wrench. Years of labor had taught me something Ethan and his kind never learned. Pain is just noise. Work through it. Finish the job. Cole grabbed my coat and threw me against the wall. You don't scare easy, do you? I spat blood onto the floor. Neither does rot. Another flash of lightning, and that's when I saw it. The gasoline can near the back door. He must have brought it with him. Stop this, Cole, I said, breathing hard. You're not doing this for him. You're doing it for yourself. For a share that doesn't exist anymore. He froze for half a second. I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, just long enough. I swung again. The wrench hit the can. Gasoline spilled across the floor in a shimmering wave. Cole lunged for the lighter under the table. I kicked it away. It slid across the tile, straight toward the stove, the one with the pilot light still on. Flame met vapor. The explosion wasn't big, but it was enough. A flash of fire erupted near the counter, and both of us stumbled back. Smoke filled the kitchen, thick and black. I crawled toward the door, coughing. Behind me, I heard Cole curse and stumble through the flames. Harold, he shouted, his voice ragged. You'll die here. I pushed the door open and fell into the rain. The cold hit me like a wall, but I didn't stop. I turned and looked back through the window. The kitchen glowed orange, the fire spreading fast. For a moment, I saw him inside. Cole, silhouetted against the light, coughing, trying to find a way out. I could have gone back, could have pulled him out. But then I remembered Lily's tears, Ethan's sneer, the nights I'd spent outside my own home because of their arrogance. Some men deserve mercy. Some only understand consequence. The roof above the kitchen cracked, sparks flying into the night. I took a step back. The rain hissed as it met the flames. Then, suddenly, silence. The fire died down quicker than I expected, the rain choking it before it could spread further. I stood there, soaked and shaking, watching smoke drift from the broken window. No sign of Cole. No sound. Only the smell of ash and gasoline, fading into the storm. When the firefighters arrived an hour later, I told them I'd been alone, that the explosion happened by accident while I was fixing the stove. They believed me, or pretended to. By dawn, half the kitchen was gone. But the rest of the house stood, scarred, but alive. Lily came home 2 days later. She froze when she saw the damage. "Dad, what happened?" "Faulty gas line," I said. "It's fixed now." She didn't question it. Maybe she didn't want to know. For the first time in weeks, I sat at the table with her and drank coffee while the morning light poured through the windows. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, but it also smelled clean, purged. Still, when she went to bed that night, I stepped outside to the oak tree again. The swing moved gently in the wind. The earth near the back door was still dark, muddy, disturbed. I didn't see Cole again. But sometimes, late at night, when the house grows quiet and the rain begins to fall, I still hear that lighter click. Once, faintly, from somewhere in the dark. And I know, Ethan's game isn't over. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and though the fire scars on the kitchen walls had faded beneath new paint, the unease inside the house never did. Lily believed what I told her, that it was just an accident. She wanted to move on, to fill the rooms again with laughter, but laughter felt wrong here now. Too fragile. At night, I'd sit on the porch with my coffee, staring into the trees. The oak still stood strong, but I no longer trusted the quiet that surrounded it. Something in me knew. Cole wasn't the last echo of Ethan. One afternoon, the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but instinct told me I should. "Mr. Whitmore?" a man's voice asked. It was smooth, practiced, the kind of tone used by people who lie for a living. "Who's asking?" "This is Officer Daniels, from the county jail. I'm calling regarding inmate Ethan Brooks. He's requested to speak with you." I froze. "Why?" "He says it's urgent. He's been authorized one call. I can put him through if you wish." For a long moment, all I heard was my own heartbeat. Then I said, "Put him through." There was a click, a crackle of static, and then his voice. "Hello, Harold." It was calm, steady. Too steady. "You've been busy," I said. He chuckled softly. "So have you. I heard about the fire. Tragic accident, they said." I said nothing. "Cole was a fool," Ethan continued. "I told him to retrieve the files quietly, but he couldn't resist playing hero. You always did bring out the worst in people." "Cole's gone," I said flatly. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm calling. You see, when a man like me loses everything, he starts thinking differently. He starts realizing that revenge isn't about taking back what's his. It's about making sure no one else enjoys it." "What do you want?" "To remind you," Ethan said, his tone hardening, "that I still have a voice outside these walls. You took my freedom, but not my reach." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Tell Lily," he added, "that debts don't die just because the debtor does." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence on the other end. That night, I couldn't sit still. I checked the locks again, the windows, even the shed foundations. The wind howled through the trees, and every creak of the house sounded like a whisper. When Lily came downstairs, she found me sitting at the table, the phone in front of me. "Dad?" she asked softly. "You didn't sleep again." "Couldn't," I said. She poured me coffee and sat across from me. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" I looked up. He called. Her face drained of color. "What? How?" "He's in prison. Even walls can't hold a man who knows how to crawl through wires," I said quietly. "He's still trying to reach us. And he has people on the outside." She grabbed my hand. "Then let's leave, Dad." Let's sell this place. We can start somewhere new. I shook my head. Running doesn't erase ghosts, Lily. It just moves them to a new address. She sighed, frustrated, tears brimming in her eyes. I just want peace. I know, I said, squeezing her hand. That's why I can't leave. Because until he's gone for good, peace isn't real. It's just a pause. That afternoon, I called Samuel. I need every detail about Ethan's case. Visitors, phone logs, accounts. Everything. He hesitated. Harold, you should let this go. The man's locked away. No, I said firmly. He's active, and I'm done waiting for the next fire. By evening, Samuel sent me what he found. I sat in my workshop, scrolling through the documents until one line stopped me cold. Visitor log, Cole Weston, 3 times before arrest. Second visitor, Alan Brooks. Alan Brooks, Ethan's brother. I'd heard the name once, years ago, a real estate broker in another state. If Cole had been the hands, Alan was the brain. And unlike Cole, he was still out there. That night, I searched for him online. His company, Brookstone Developments, had gone bankrupt last year. Lawsuits, debt. He was desperate, and desperate men make dangerous allies. The next day, I got proof. A letter in the mailbox, this time with a signature. Alan Brooks. It was short, just one sentence. You took my brother's freedom. I'll take your daughter's. My vision tunneled. The paper crumpled in my hand. Lily was in danger again. I didn't tell her. Not yet. She'd panic, and panic makes people predictable. Instead, I called Samuel once more. I'm sending you something, I said. Trace the address if you can. I'll try, he said. But Harold, what are you planning? I'm going to end this, I said quietly. For her. That night, I sat in the dark, the house silent except for the ticking of the old clock. I thought about everything. The years I'd spent building this home, the nights I'd stayed awake to protect what little I had left. They'd taken enough. When dawn came, I packed the same bag again. Documents, the flash drive, the wrench. I placed the photograph of Lily in my jacket pocket and kissed the top of her head before leaving. She didn't stir. The rain had stopped. The world smelled clean again, like a blank page waiting for ink. But I wasn't writing stories anymore. I was closing one. The sun rose gray that morning. No warmth, no promise. Just light, dull and cold. I drove without music, the road empty except for the sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires. In the passenger seat sat the small wooden box, the same one that had survived the fire. Inside were the copies, the flash drive, and one more thing I'd added last night, my confession. Not to the police, but to Lily. Every truth, every lie I'd told to protect her. She deserved to know, even if I never came back. The address Samuel had traced led me 40 miles north, to an old industrial district near the edge of the city. Abandoned warehouses, rusted fences, puddles shining with oil. The kind of place where people disappear without noise or questions. I parked the truck by a broken sign that read Brooks and Weston Storage. The irony almost made me smile. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the smell of metal. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, steady beats. My footsteps echoed. I followed the sound of a faint humming, not machinery, but electricity. A single bulb hung from the ceiling in the center of the room. Beneath it stood a man, Alan Brooks. He looked nothing like Ethan, taller, sharper features, colder eyes. But the arrogance was the same. He didn't look surprised to see me. I was wondering when you'd show, he said. His voice was smoother than his brother's, quieter too. You've been busy, Mr. Whitmore. I could say the same, I replied. He smiled faintly. You know, my brother used to talk about you all the time. Said you were the perfect example of stubbornness. Too proud to die, too quiet to surrender. He's not wrong. Alan nodded. That's why I admire you. Men like us, we build things. Houses, families, empires. But the problem with building is that someone always wants to knock it down. He stepped closer, his shoes splashing in the puddles. Ethan trusted me with his accounts. His records. Everything you exposed, he made backups. You didn't erase anything, Harold. You just made it mine. I looked at him carefully. And what do you plan to do with it? Finish what he started, Alan said simply. Sell the land, drain the assets, and make sure your daughter's left with the debts you worked so hard to pay off. Poetic, isn't it? The way he said it, calm, clinical, made something inside me harden into ice. I set the wooden box down between us. You came for this, didn't you? His eyes flicked to it, hungry. So you did bring it. Everything you need, I said. The files, the deeds, the recordings. He crouched, reaching for the latch, and that's when I spoke again. There's something else inside, too. He froze. What? I met his gaze. The truth your brother never told you. He frowned, lifting the lid slowly. Inside, beneath the papers, was a small recorder, the same one I'd used days ago. The red light blinked once before the audio began to play. Ethan's voice filled the warehouse. Alan, if you're hearing this, it means you failed me. You always thought you were smarter, didn't you? That I was reckless. But you were the greedy one. You never realized that I hid the money. Not from Harold, not from the banks, from you. Alan's face went pale. So go ahead, chase ghosts. By the time you find what's left, I'll be gone. And you'll be broke, just like you deserve. The recording ended with a click. For a moment, the only sound was the dripping water. Then Alan slammed the box shut. Where did you get this? He hissed. I didn't, I said. Cole brought it to me before he died. He just didn't know what it was. He stared at me, breathing hard. You're lying. Maybe, I said. But you can't prove it. His hand went to his coat pocket. I saw the glint of metal, a gun. You could have walked away, Harold, he said, voice trembling with rage. But you had to play hero. You took everything from us. I took a slow step back. You did that yourselves. Lightning flashed through the broken window, and in that split second, his face twisted. Fury, desperation, fear all tangled into one. He raised the gun. The shot echoed across the warehouse, sharp, deafening. For a second, I didn't feel anything. Just the smell of smoke and the ringing in my ears. Then I looked down. The bullet had hit the metal beam beside me, ricocheting off into the darkness. Alan staggered, staring at the hole in the beam, realization dawning on his face. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared at him. Go home, I said quietly. Whatever your brother promised you, it's ashes now. You can't rebuild from ashes. He hesitated, his arm trembling, then lowered the gun. You think you've won, he muttered. But men like me always come back. Then make sure it's not to my doorstep, I said. He backed away slowly, grabbed the box, and disappeared into the rain. I didn't chase him. There was no need. Some men destroy themselves faster than you ever could. When I finally stepped outside, the storm had stopped. The air was cold but clean, washed of its poison. I drove home in silence, the road gleaming beneath the moonlight like a river of silver. When I arrived, Lily was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes widened when she saw the bruises on my face. Dad, what happened? I smiled faintly. Nothing worth remembering. She helped me inside, fussing over every scratch, every cut. You're getting too old for this, she muttered, half angry, half crying. Maybe, I said softly. But I still know how to finish a job. We sat in silence for a while. The house creaked, the fire crackled, and the world outside finally seemed still. After she went to bed, I walked to the window and looked out at the oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the night breeze. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not the false kind that hides fear, but the quiet understanding that comes after surviving the storm. I thought of Ethan, of Alan, of Cole, and realized none of them ever understood what I did. Revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself they tried to break. And tonight, standing in my half-burned kitchen, I felt whole again. I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle around me like an old friend. Tomorrow, I'd rebuild. Not for pride, not for victory, for Lily, and maybe, finally, for myself.